It is a little after 4 in the afternoon on a July day in 1954, and Edna Novak has already lost the fight with the heat. She lives on the 4th floor of a brick walk-up on Scranton Avenue, in the Polish quarter of Cleveland the neighbors still call Warsaw, Slavic village. Since morning she has done everything her mother taught her. She pulled the shades against the sun before 9. She hung a bedsheet, wet from the sink, across the open window so the breeze would come through cool. She carried the potatoes down to the cellar where the air still remembers spring. And now, with the mill letting out and her husband due home, she stands in the kitchen in front of the one machine in the apartment built to fight the heat, a black steel oscillating fan, turning its face slowly from the icebox to the table and back again. The fan is running on its highest speed. It has been running for 6 hours. And the apartment is still 90 degrees. Edna is not confused about why. She has lived 4 summers in these rooms and she knows the fan does not make cold, it only moves what is already there. The question that afternoon is older than she is, older than the fan, older than the wires in the wall. It is the question every American family asked before the cold came indoors: if the air itself is hot, what good is moving it? To answer that, you have to understand what the fan actually was. In 1882, a 22-year-old engineer named Schuyler Scotts Wheeler bolted a 2-bladed brass propeller onto an electric motor and made the first electric fan, no cage, dangerous, and thrilling. 7 years later Philip Deal mounted a blade on a sewing machine motor, screwed it to the ceiling, and invented the ceiling fan. By the mid-1900s Deal's company added the split joint that let a fan swing its head from side to side, and the oscillating fan was born. In 1910 Westinghouse sold a household electric fan and advertised that the electricity to run it cost only 1/4 of a penny an hour. 3 American names came to own the summer: Emerson of St. Louis, Westinghouse, and General Electric. Their early fans were cast iron and brass, heavy as a bowling ball, built so well that Emerson stamped some of them, built to last. When brass grew scarce, the blades turned to steel around 1931 and later aluminum. But here is the thing every one of these beautiful machines had in common. A fan does not cool air. It cannot. It only pushes it. It works on the human body by speeding the evaporation of sweat, so that the breeze feels like relief even when the thermometer never moves. That is the whole secret and the whole limit of the object humming on Edna's table. If this story of the American summer means something to you, take a moment to subscribe to Before AC USA. It is how these forgotten histories keep finding the people who lived them. If you or your family remember a summer ruled by a single fan, the one everybody crowded around, tell us in the comments where it sat and who got to sit closest to it. And if you are new here, in a coming video we follow the Iceman up 4 flights of stairs, to the frozen block that kept food and families alive before a refrigerator hummed in every kitchen. Because remember, the fan gave working families a breeze they could afford, but the one thing it could never give them was cooler air. So if it could not beat the heat, why did families like the Novaks buy one, and guard it, and carry it from apartment to apartment for 20 years? Because it was the only comfort a working household could actually afford, and even that took saving. Consider what money meant in this neighborhood. This was steel mill country, the men worked the Newburgh mills, and the Depression had gutted the pay. According to U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics data on average weekly manufacturing earnings, from September 1929 to March 1933 factory wages fell from $24 a week to below $15, and it took another 4 years for them to return to pre-depression levels. Against wages like that, a good cast iron oscillating fan was not an impulse, it was a decision made at the kitchen table, a purchase weighed against shoes and coal. And once it was bought, it belonged to the whole family. There was one fan in the house, and it lived where the family lived, the kitchen in the day, moved to the bedroom doorway at night, turned to face whoever was sickest, youngest, or oldest. To sit in the direct line of the oscillating fan was a small privilege, granted and withdrawn. The machine was not luxury and it was not misery. It was the sound of a family deciding, every hot night, who needed the breeze most. Because the fan alone was never enough, the real skill was building a system around it. Managing summer heat in a 4th-floor walk-up was a craft, learned from mothers and passed to daughters, and the fan was only one tool in it. You started with the sun, shades and curtains drawn on the bright side of the building by mid-morning, windows shut against the hot outside air until evening. Then, after dark, you reversed everything, you opened the windows on opposite walls and let the fan pull the cooler night air through in a current, a manufactured cross breeze. The wet sheet Edna hung was real evaporative cooling. As the water evaporated, it stole a few degrees from the air passing through it. Families who had a little more money put a fan in the window itself, turned to blow the day's trapped heat out. And by the 1950s some houses had an attic or whole house fan, a big slow blade in the ceiling that could empty the hot air out of a whole home in minutes and drag the evening in behind it. None of it made cold. All of it made the difference between a night you could sleep and a night you could not. And then came the days when none of it worked at all. Picture the heat wave, 97 degrees, 80% humidity, the air like a wet wool blanket that would not lift for a week. On a day like that, we now know something Edna could only feel, that once the air is hotter than your skin, a fan stops helping and begins to hurt, blowing hot air across the body faster than sweat can cool it. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention now advises using a fan only if indoor temperatures are less than 90 degrees Fahrenheit, warning that above that a fan can increase body temperature, and the Environmental Protection Agency adds that in the mid-90s and higher, electric fans will not prevent heat-related illness. The reason is written in the death records. Per the Washington Post, the killer heat wave of 1936 led to the heat-related deaths of an estimated 5,000 people. The Old Farmer's Almanac records that Central Park hit 106 degrees Fahrenheit on July 9th, and that of nearly 1,000 deaths nationwide in that 10-day wave, 76 were in New York City. The summer of 1954 was the third scorching summer in a row across the middle of the country. But the heat never fell evenly. Who lived and who died depended on the roof over your head and the block you lived on. In Cleveland, black families arriving in the Great Migration were shut by redlining and restrictive deeds into the oldest, most crowded housing, the Central District, and by the mid-1950s the aging neighborhood of Hoff, which flipped from 5% non-white in 1950 to 74% by 1960 as urban renewal bulldozed homes elsewhere. And this was no accident of comfort. A study of 108 U.S. urban areas found formerly redlined neighborhoods still run hotter than the rest of their cities, on average 2.6 degrees Celsius warmer, and in some cities nearly 7 degrees Celsius hotter, largely because they hold far less shade tree canopy. The fan was democratic. The heat was not. So the family that could not cool its rooms did the oldest thing of all, it left them. When the apartment became an oven, the neighborhood became the bedroom. On Scranton Avenue the front stoop filled up after supper, mothers with mending, men in undershirts, children chasing the last light, because a concrete step in the open air was cooler than any room upstairs. People dragged mattresses onto the fire escape and slept there above the street, the way New Yorkers had for generations, close enough to hear the neighbors turn over. In the parks, whole families spread blankets on the grass on the worst nights. The tavern on the corner, and on Fleet Avenue there were said to be 10.5 miles, was cool and dark and sold cold beer, and the church basement was the coolest room most families ever stood in. This was the social world the heat built. It was not romance and it was not a postcard. Sleeping on a fire escape meant risking a fall, and a stoop full of neighbors was a stoop with nowhere private to go. But it was a genuine common life, lived outdoors and out loud, and it existed precisely because no one could shut the heat out alone. There was one place in the city where the air really was cold, and America learned to worship it. In the 1920s the engineer Willis Carrier perfected a machine that could truly chill and dry the air, and the movie theaters bought it first. When Carrier's centrifugal system was installed in New York's Rivoli Theater, famously debuted on a Memorial Day weekend in 1925, crowds walked in off the sweltering sidewalk and felt manufactured cold for the first time in their lives. By 1930, more than 300 theaters across the country hung banners that read, "Cooled by refrigeration," the word spelled in letters made of icicles and snow. This is why the double feature exists. In summer, people did not come only for the picture, they came for the cold air, and they stayed for 2 films to keep it. In the deadly summer of 1936, a movie theater was not entertainment, it was survival, a dime matinee that could save an old man's life for an afternoon. But you had to have the dime, and you had to go home when the lights came up. The cold in the Rivoli was real, and it was rented by the hour, and it belonged to no one who could not pay at the door. Then the cold came home, and it changed everything. The pieces had been falling into place for years. Frigidaire built a room cooler in 1929, and inventors patented a window unit in 1931, but the machine only reached ordinary streets after the war. Fetters and others began selling window air conditioners in 1947, and the price slowly came within reach. In 1956 a 1-horsepower window unit in the Sears catalog cost $299.95, still real money, about 164 hours of a factory worker's pay, but no longer impossible. Fewer than 1 American home in 10 had air conditioning in 1950, by 1960 the number was climbing fast and would never stop. And so, one summer, a box appeared in the Novak's window, a humming Westinghouse that at last made the air cold. The old oscillating fan, the one the whole family had gathered around, went down to the basement to sit beside the storm windows and the Christmas boxes. And something else happened that no one decided and everyone felt. The stoop began to empty. With cold air behind the glass, there was no reason to carry a chair down 4 flights, no reason to sleep on the fire escape, no reason to knock on a neighbor's door for a cooler room. The historian Raymond Arsenault, writing of the South, put it exactly: as Southerners have retreated behind closed doors and windows into a world of whirring compressors, they have lost much of what made them distinctive and interesting, and the same thing happened on 1,000 northern streets. Air conditioning was a genuine mercy. It saved the very old and the very sick who used to die in the heat. But it also privatized the summer. The cold that had once been shared in a theater or chased on a stoop now belonged to each family alone, sealed behind one window, humming in the dark. The breeze had been public. The cold was private. And the last thing the fan ever did, before the basement, was hum. Thank you for spending these minutes in the heat with us. If you made it this far, subscribe and stay with Before AC USA. In a coming video we follow the Iceman up 4 flights of stairs to the frozen block that kept food and families alive before a refrigerator hummed in every kitchen. And tell us, if you or your family remember a summer ruled by a single fan, where did it sit, and who got to sit closest to it? Because in the end, the fan gave working families a breeze they could afford. The one thing it could never give them was cooler air. We will see you on the next one.